Good morning. Welcome to the home of the Calgary Unitarians. I am Mariana Louise Kovar, one of our congregation's worship associates. I'm delighted to have you all with me this morning. We have a summer worship tradition in Calgary that allows deviation from our usual order of service. That being said, as we seek to widen the circle, I'm sure Calgary is not the only congregation questioning our standard order of service that we follow every service at any time of year. We do, however, always light our chalice. Today we light our chalice with the words of Florence Caplow. We kindle this flame, honoring the doorways in our souls, the windows through which we gaze at one another, the balconies where we catch glimpses of the sky, the thresholds we stand on this morning, wondering, hoping, fearing, dreaming. I opened our service this morning with some quotes about poetry. Poetry is a tool by Angela McAfee. Poetry is this beautiful, terrible tool where we carve out our inner experience and jumble it around in a pleasing way in the hopes that someone, somewhere, will connect with it, maybe even be bolstered by it. If not healed, then have the understanding they are not alone in how they're feeling. Sometimes it feels hopeless. Sometimes it's our last hope that allows us to scribble out the dark complexity between our mind and our heart, or praise the way the light falls on our lover's cheekbone. Sometimes it's a tool for social justice, a way to bridge the gap between disparate life experiences. It can create empathy and understanding. It can hit us where we didn't know we were hurting. It can help us make sense of loss, of death, of boredom. Sharp imagery, concise and expertly placed words carry us over the threshold of other, until we can feel what the poet might be feeling, no matter how different we are. And maybe that is why we write poems, to learn how to hold space for our own flawed beings and how to hold compassion for others. That feels world-changing to me. And Stephen Fry. Modern readers are taught to read poems as if they were crossword puzzles. We have, all of us, sat with brows furrowed, feeling incredibly dense and dumb as the teacher asks us to respond to an image or line of verse. What do you think Wordsworth was referring to here? What does Wilfred Owen achieve by using this metaphor? How does Keats respond to the nightingale? Why do you think Shakespeare uses the word gentle as a verb? Yet, great poets seem to be able to transcend boundaries to find a way to speak to us without need of explanation or explication. Poetry is one of the most powerful forms of writing because it takes language, a language we believe we know, and transforms it. Suddenly, the words do not sound the same or mean the same. The pattern of the sentences sounds new and melodious. It is truly another language, exclusively for the writer and the reader. No poem can be read in the same way because the words mean something different to each of us. For this reason, many find poetry an elusive art form. However, the issue in understanding poetry lies in how you read poetry. Reading it logically results in an overall comprehension, rigid and unchanging. However, reading it emotionally allows the nuances and paradoxes to enter our understanding. Anyone who writes poetry can attest, you have to write it with an open heart. So as a reader, we must do the same. All poems are insights into the innermost, most intimate workings of the writer's mind and soul. To read it coldly and rationally would be shutting the door on the relationship the writer is attempting to forge with you. Opening your heart to poetry is the only way to get fulfillment from it. Research has identified that poetry is experienced or processed differently by our brains than prose. Poetry is experienced in the same areas as music and emotions. Another unknown origin quote, the greatest poets not only change the way we see the world, but also cause us to question our perception and interpretation of everyday reality. The greatest poetry subverts the dominant paradigm, ultimately challenges the status quo of the world, and transforms it into something strange and new. Poetry is a universal language. Its origin dates back to the 17th century. In those days, it was often accompanied by music. Many of the poets we are comforted by, inspired by, challenged by, or healed by have long since died. But their words live on, and the creation of poetry is now alive and well. I cannot imagine a UU rite of passage that does not include a few lines of poetry. And I think it might be a challenge to find a North American congregation that does not know Rumi or Mary Oliver. And now we'll have Wakefield Brewster's performance. In addition to being a professional poet, a spoken word artist, and poet laureate of Calgary, Wakefield is a poetry slam champion, an advocate for literacy, a community builder, a volunteer, and a leadership mentor for youth. He is also a registered massage therapist and owner of Wakeful Wellness Massage Therapy and Healing Space. Let's hear from Wakefield.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Wow. Thank you for having me. This is an honor to be bringing what I call poetry to you. Thank you for honoring National Poetry Month. I've never been to a service that did this before, so thank you. It's the first time I've had a congregation ringing in the month, and it's a very important month. We heard some very important things already said about what poetry is, what poetry can do, and how it belongs to all of us. I have been called a lot of things. Sometimes poet comes after those things people call me. One of those things, slam poet, I hear that. Performance poet, I prefer that. But often when it relates to the world around me, I'm often called a social poet. I'm not up here writing out my rainbows and unicorns. I'm usually writing about things that are harder, things that are darker, things that are not so nice. And it's not for shock effect or to bring anybody down, but I find humans actually bond best in darkness. Your neighbor wins 48 million. How happy are you? You don't run over there, really, to get the money, or you try to ignore them. It's a weird conundrum to live next to someone who's insanely happy about something fortunate that is only about them. But if that neighbor or that friend falls into depression, falls into grieving, has the simple problems of life and they're not overcoming them, where are you? You're right there, and you're bonding with them. So I like to write about the things that we actually truly bond over, and that is helping each other rise up. I have a poem I'd like to begin with because this poem is seen as very universal, and it's very old. This poem is 21 years old. This poem is H2O, and it is inspired by the Walkerton water crisis. I'm from Toronto, so I heard about this first, and I went crazy. I was so appalled and angry that once again our first world country, which has the greatest freshwater reserves on the planet, and we're known as the greatest first world country in the world, would do what we did over water and money. So like an artist, like a poet, I responded artistically, and this is the poem that came from it. In this poem, you'll hear my voice move. I work with melody, though I'm not a singer. Trust me, I can't sing. I work with rhythm because I'm also a percussionist. I'm a classical pianist, and I'm a percussionist, and I'm also a rapper. And I've taken all of those musical abilities and put them behind my performance with literacy. You will dance, and I hope that you take these steps with me. I appreciate people feeling how they want to audibly when they hear something they do and do not like. So if you want to, make some noise because you hear something you like, please go right ahead. Poets love that. And if you hear something you don't like and you want to let me know and it's a heckle, please go ahead. Go right ahead, because it makes us feel challenged and reconsider what we've said. The reason I'm a poet is because I've tried so very hard to listen to the world so that I can earn this opportunity to speak to it. So often my poetry is about you. I'm going to begin with H2O, even though I retired this poem because it's so relevant again. You ever heard of Flint, Michigan? Yes. Right. And when I speak to students who are young and they don't know, I tell them it's a place in the States, and the town basically looks like me, and when they turn on the water, it looks like me. I ask them, do you understand anything about our indigenous communities across North America? And they give me some yeses about this and that. Do you know that they still do not have any accessible, running, clean water? It's 2022. In 2022, we can raise 10 million in 3 days for the convoy. 3 days, 10 million, just like that. And how long did it take for authorities to stop that foolishness? A couple weeks. You put an indigenous person in front of a pipeline, they'll have military there in no time. This poem is more relevant than ever. And it's universal because when you talk about water, no one is left out. This poem is H2O. There once was a time when we flowed like rhyme. Ebbs and tides flowed on our insides. We took no free rides. We just rode waves and dug sacred graves because we knew the earth saves. And when we dropped to our knees to drink at our seas, shores, eventually we ended up creating seesaws as we gazed into the depths and only saw the surface, the face of folly to come. We drank our own reflections with gluttonous vanity, gulped down gallons with thirsty profanity, draining drops like 3-pointers, pollute and then shoot into the earth a dirty needle. The sewers beneath are the burning veins of acid rains. Sludge and sickness pumped through pipes. Walkerton walked in medical plights. It blacked out some lights, then led to court fights. And while the poor fight for it, the rich want to store it. We'll make you pay. We'll make you pay. The flow of H2O, we gon' keep on the stay locked up. They ain't gonna die for the supply be stocked up. So forget your creation of the Canal Suez and neglectful flex on the Exxon Valdez, because oil and water, they just don't mix. But slicks and puddles gives kids heads tricks. They think that it looks pretty. You see all the colors now. They can finally touch a rainbow and make it dance like a beautiful woman. But once again, the image of life is washed away. Back to murky and muddy waters, our oceans sing the blues. Environmental channels hype to bring the bad news that we're all gonna lose. And I'm getting too confused because I used to drink my water from a bottle. I heard the vehicle of pollution was choking on the throttle. Then a rumor went about I could just not believe. I spelled Evian backwards and found I was naive. My gut is on the grieve. Believe you me, I'm enough pain, G. I first thought that I contracted ileitis or colitis, but from the water cooler I drank gastroenteritis. You see how Mother Nature spite us? She did it, she done it, and she'll do it once again. She'll fool us into thinking we can cheat our fated end, for we put the pain in her rain and then showered her with disrespect. And we gon' thirst worse unless we get this all in check, because when the oceans all evaporate, we can't make juice some concentrate. No fluid moving up and down in the locks. No creamy whipped potatoes from a cardboard box. We have doomed ourselves a drunken dry demise in the stretching of the skin and the bulging of the eyes, because nobody tries. We'd rather drink lies. We hold fast to mistakes of the past, latch to the ludicrous and not liquid life, because we can't let go. Forget what you know, we've forgotten how to flow like water. Thank you very much. I would like to present this next poem because right away I love to bring my ma into my life in all facets and forms and aspects, and even poetry. So this poem was inspired by my ma. She's a very beautiful lady, and she really understands me, and she gave me all the chances I needed to be understood. This is a feminine positive poem. It also celebrates astrophysics. Yeah. Neil deGrasse Tyson, does anyone know Neil deGrasse Tyson? He put my people in space, man. He's a hero of mine. I'm from the old Star Trek days. I'm from Spock and Kirk. I've been waiting to wear masks and act like craziness all my life. This whole COVID thing totally played to my childhood sci-fi thing. I was like, woo, it's here. Now that guy actually put us up there. He's a big hero of mine. So this poem also celebrates astrophysics, black culture, and lyricism. H2O was all monothematic. It was about water. It was inspired by an incident. You can't leave it too small. You have to welcome people into your world of words. So to write about Walkerton would be too tiny. Even if you're very worldly and up on the matters of Canada, still, you could miss it. We miss a whole lot of stuff that happens outside our door. So I couldn't just write about Walkerton, because only Walkerton people would appreciate it, and they're not appreciating what happened. So I had to walk water around the world in different ways so that everyone could jump in the pool. Now that's monothematic. These are 4 major themes that I'm going to put into this poem, and they seem unrelated, and in some ways they are, and in some ways they're not. And without drawing direct relations to them, you treat different subjects and aspects of poetry in a singular poem like a patchwork quilt. Your language threads it together. So this poem is called Luna, Luna Herstory. It is time for the next. Pages must be turned, books must be burned. We shall erase the past and make time start now. For history glory caused a frown upon my brow. It was all too much for me. It was all like real TV. I was overwhelmed and swamped like an inbox. An innocent woman stoned by rocks. Tumbling, breadfruit dropping out of trees unseen with ease and green gleam. Lower spectrum introduced purples, blues, and greens again. Don't you really remember when Mama said, eat your greens, eat your greens. Reflect on those words and tell me how it seems. She knew more than she she spoke. She birthed some mad thinkers, then the illogic broke. It broke and broke the back out. It stoked and smoked the blackout. And no one was prepared for what beast was unleashed upon the land. Stipulation and manipulation walking hand in hand. The illogical language then became grand, convoluted and compromised. Through bloody blue and blackened eyes, the black looked into the night like its namesake, made the spacescaper words come awake, lifted the level like a lyrical Lazarus, denied the slick grip we know that time has on us, spilling through space like sugar. We are the sweetest of stars. We stay redder than Mars. Giants like Jupiter, dust in lunar winds, blowing throughout all of our travels, bringing fear to the atmosphere. Subway to Venus, y'all move it to the rear. And still, I couldn't get excited, landing on different planetary spots, the ones yet undiscovered. But you gon' tell me you uncovered it first. Prepare for the worst, for I am like the enemy in the lyrical arms race. Call me the Black Russian, cause I made it first to space and then got celestial. Frightened, for the style is quick, fast. See, dark speech move like that, so you don't know what happened. Traveling at the speed of light, that's why we call it rapping. Her story is the one to listen to. She brought all of us here to do what we do, and I have always loved her. Call her the moon, but really she's the sun. So I call my brother son, cause he shine like one, as we all should be, inside the Milky Way womb that we all call she. Did it for us all. Her stories were pure light. Her tales weren't tall, but we let her take the fall. It's time to bring her back and put her high beyond sight, and let her know that she's a comfort in the blackness of the night, and let history cascade like Lucifer, for he just ain't bright. Thank you. I intended, and I will, give you a selection of different pieces of poetry to give you an idea of a creative mission I am forever on, and that is, with every poem I write, I attempt to be a different poet. Of course, it's going to be Wakefield Brewster. No matter how you hear it, you know it's me, once you get to know me. I'm not Morgan Freeman yet, but, or James Earl Jones, but I'm getting there. So in this respect, I try to change not just the topics, of course, but the style, the rhyme scheme, the pulse, the meter, all the tricks. I try to rearrange them at the very, very least. Now, this poem is quite personal to me, and it's titled Blacklit. And there's entendres in the title: black, literature, lit, light. There's a few things there already. To be succinct about its description, understand that this poetry is all black poetry. I'm a black man. My whole lens is colored by what I know I look like and what you know I look like. It matters. So none of this isn't jaded by what and who I am visually, and how I have to take that visual aspect, and it's visceral. So this poem is how, in some ways, I see myself moving through these worlds as a black man. And this poem is blacklit. Professional tip: burp before you start your poetry. Get all the burps out. It's true, you don't want to be, you don't want to do that. That's terrible. Okay, here we go. Wait, actually, yeah. Okay. This is blacklit. I swallow some blackboard paint so I can paint the word. Ain't a word, spitting ink or chalk, I still talk. A fax machine paradox proper, truth stopper, can't stop me or mock me. European MCs can't top me. When a brother gets a hold of technology, it's microphone recology. Dealing with your lame footin' cans to puppetology. I offer no apology for bovine or swine, domesticated equine for mankind. My own mind up in mix mixed artistic with linguistic, and I slung a hot rot like Basquiat when he brought the black thought. Bleeding paint upon paper, he changed and then deranged the sight of man, the earth shaper. He closed the eye caper, and some years later, since my brother's life broke, I realize I am a smudge, a perfect brushstroke with pretty colors, pretty colors. I am orange and yellow and red. I surprised myself when poetically bled myself. I was tongue twisted up like a dread with thoughts that wrought sticking up in my head, thrust back to life like Lazarus. Strife had me strike me a hazardous pose, wide open with wrists and neck exposed. Liquid life trickling eclectic flows from my veins. Pure fire, voodoo rains, funeral pyre. My heated aspiration to be an element, not simply elemental or even instrumental, but a song and a symphony with self-pity, sympathy. I'm conducting those in the first row who think they know. I make them all play second fiddle if they don't jump out the middle and flee like they was escaping the passage. Feces and vomit on the slavery comet founded inspiration in black and broken bones. The sounds of the lands that we call our homes, and we can all hear it, drawn to its timbre like whips to cracks, licks to backs, feet to axe. Funny how we stood taller when we lost our toes and held our heads high in a regal manner, defying the yokes, learning the language to create great stains. Kings and queens now bound in chains and walking like gods, unlike the ghosts of our gracious hosts, now passed on to the land of duppies, weighted down by the shackles of brutality that they constructed. Inside the hall of shame, each one has been inducted back to the books, back to the beginning, back to the future, what we were and what we are. Back in the black, hiding in the back row, back in the black like these cats don't know. Black like my namesake, black like death row, black like rum cake, black like afro, black like my taekwondo brothers afro dojo. Because you can't wake a blank slate, because I'm the willing you can't shift my shape. I take your shots like I'm in the Russian system, off the shoulder, wrist strike to the throat. I'm a diss 'em, and I'm a talk louder, and I'm a walk prouder. I'm leading by design because this hour is mine. I leave you with the fever, then your lip catch a slap from the Anosha Bashobi Ingalosi of rap. This here is the evolution, amoeba to man, grunts to griot, slavery to bravery, cryptic like messages written on rice, rolled up in blunt papers and burned like our foremothers at the stake, hung like our forefathers dancing from trees, a painful slow waltz done in black and broken knees. Please, please, please help me find the method. I talk so much that my teeth itch and my hair hurts. Lyrical spurts, I try and I try and I try. You say you want a sensitive man and then you hate me when I cry. I gotta internalize and re-energize and represent, because you know my words quick, clever, could never be spent. And in this industry, no poem C mediocrity can mess with me. Though it's not all I'll be in this here reality, I'ma flow it cause you'll know it. Black is poetry, see? Thank you. Thank you. I don't know what my timing is like. Should I do a few more or? Okay. Okay. All right. We talked about mental wellness, and I've had my struggles. I am an alcoholic and an addict. I unfortunately had some traumas at age 8, and that's when I started my drinking career. Yeah. And when I became 18, I'm an adult now. I moved and graduated to substances. And I lived that destructive lifestyle till just 5.5 years ago. So this world is still pretty fresh to me. It's still pretty new. And the one thing that I learned recovering is that mental unwellness, addiction, alcoholism, and destructive behavior pretty much hand in hand. And for a very long time, most of us did not know that or want to accept that. So trauma sucks. and I take no responsibility for what happened. The path it set me on, that is not my fault. My recovery is all mine, and I own it, and I put this out there to let people know that there is life on the other side. I was in it for over 3 decades, and I stand here in front of you. So, thank you, but I have to put this message out here and there to let people know they're not alone. Poetry often is a short story. Short stories convey messages. Messages are information, and we are living in the age of information and sharing stories. So this is all about communication. And I like to communicate some of the hardest things that I deal with because I know there's some of possibly yours. And when I write poetry that's so visceral and vulnerable and exposing, there's really no other way to write. So this poem is called Perceptions, and when I went into states of what I now know to be one of the aspects is called hyperfocus, I describe it as my brain being an ant's nest, not a hornet's nest or anything that flies, because I could feel all the feet running. It was like it split open and it was just itchy, literally itchy in my head. Can't scratch it. And the thing that I kept doing was finding myself in places that were very populated, very busy, light, color, sound, action, noise, people, movement. In Toronto, that's easy to do. Get on the TTC, Toronto Transit, get on the public transit. Just get on that. 10 million people moving around, that means it runs all night. TTC runs 24/7. So I'd find the 24/7 lines and make sure that I cross those paths. And one time when I was in hyperfocus, I said, I gotta get out of here. So I did what I did, which was get around people, the creative, boom. It's a response. It's like a survival response sometimes, because I'm feeling crazy. And boom, creativity wants to rise above the feeling. So I rode the TTC for 19 straight hours one day. And when I woke up from it, I was like, ooh, where am I? And I had this poem, and this poem isn't something I necessarily created. It's how I perceived the day in front of me. And it's going all over the place because that's me leaving a bus, going to a streetcar, leaving a streetcar, going to a subway, leaving a subway, or just going between cars because I'm very ADHD and I can't be still. So amongst all of this crazy going on, I'm running around going, yeah! And I'm writing down everything I see. This poem is called Perceptions because this is just how I saw things. I'm piecing it together. Pardon me. If you will, please indulge me in engaging the spirit of radio, if you wish. And that is close your eyes. The eyes always lie. I love podcasts, I love radio. Everyone has to paint their own pictures. And I'm not getting better looking over time, so this is as good as it gets. And if you want to just really indulge in this, please. My voice is actually quite different when you can't see me. So let's see how this goes. And it's a ride, so your eyes will be closed for a while if you do this. Here we go. I'm piecing it together, and it resembles a cultural mosaic with the minorities nominating and the majority dominating. Clickety-clack go the tracks, cutting on black backs for not serving enough flapjacks. Verbal flax will only cause lacks. Funds get shunned in stacks, then they up and raise the tax. Now you can't buy no wax, you gon' have to sell your sacks. Teardrops drop in dollars and cents. We be sitting in the middle of the fence with pockets only full of pence. Hence, we must make a reconnaissance with our common sense and get all pence. If, like, I can see the bigger picture. Here comes the scripture of the lyrical lipster, slipped ya, tripped ya, then a jujitsu flipped ya. Technology blipped ya, society clipped ya, like life was tried, tested, and tenuously true. Switching. The mama's in the kitchen like my brother said she'd be pitching a conniption about a situation that needed stitching. But however, she never did lift the lever on the encryption. So eclectic and enigmatic, though the bowl of her soul was naturally emphatic, she went purely automatic. attic, and all we got from mama was static, lopping off limbs to secure bladed winds. I hear the false and the falsities of a humdrum. I once did stun, and then I stunk. The sweater of my creativity shrunk. I am not who's quick, but dead like a cup of liquid lead. Go Mercury! A strong goblet of silver in my throat made a sliver. So bring me to the giver, and I'll teach him how to share. I'll rip out all his hair and let it float to the earth like celestial webs. So now the tide ebbs, and somewhere in the middle, I think I'm swollen. I don't feel whole, but I think I have a hole in my third inner eye. Now that the body is incomplete, a spiritual cyclops. May a blinded soul run rampant through your rivers of repose and your pastures of peace. Goliath will plague pillars like Samson smashing. Moses and God went tablet rehashing. 2 sins and Joshua reaps the wind, so I'm with Joshi. He's gonna crumble the walls of Jericho. He's coming through with ill horn cornucopia of ill flow. Melodies still blow. Felonies, bad stone masons, poor architects. Only you will be disappointed at the edifice erected, at the whip poor workmanship that couldn't be detected. I can feel the changes coming on. Not like menopause, but men must pause and consider applying some feminine laws as society falls and claws out its throat. Emergency tracheostomy for the masses, and still we find ways to smoke ourselves to death, choke ourselves of breath till there's almost nothing left, just like grains of crystal meth, fragile and fragmented, agile and demented, pseudo-stratified, separated and cemented like plasma and hemoglobin, a dim watt light that could still put a strobe in. Anachronistic fashion, anarchistic passion. I am a thief and a liar. I steal truth and run upon rooftops so tin. Inside my head resides a din with a clip and a clop and a pace that won't stop. I am being pursued. Demons are upon me like flies on eyes. The UN tries but blatantly denies its contradictory position. When life gets stashed in the name of a mission, impossible that every human belly on the swelly be full, because cats, they be starving like Marvin. They're dying in the heat of a city summer swelter. They're sticking to the floors of a frozen bus shelter. Live people by day, but by night, who knows? The homeless death toll, it lives and breathes and grows in the body like cancer, in the mind like neuromancer, pummeling psyches, pounding cerebellums, looking for the button to initiate restart, pulling personified pixels apart. My heart, I am frozen, stuck in the winter net. I have been molested by the mechanical hands of a robotic Jack Frost. I didn't have no backup, so my files got lost. Shuffle through random access, disk defragmenter, file, edit, view, insert, format, tools, table, window, help! Thank you. The whole exclamation point at the end of it is a cry for help. I'll give you maybe 2 more or 1 more. I'll give you 1 more. I'll give you 1 more. This one is a self-empowerment poem. This poem explains a little bit about how I went through school with what was going on in here. And yay, tribulations, and yay, triumph. That's not the whole poem. I really want everyone to remember this as they grow up. When you're growing up, because we're all growing up, you start to live lives of conviction, if you're lucky, and you decide who you're going to be and what you want to do. It's amazing how fast the words "you can't" come out of other people's mouths. It's just amazing. We live in a compassionate age, and still, "you can't" comes off the hip. It comes from family, friends, enemies, frenemies, pretend to be strangers, comes from anyone. This poem, throughout the story and at the end, keep these 2 things in mind. When you hear that you can't, You probably can, and you probably should.
Amen.
This poem is I Can. And thank you. After a decade of delivery on the MIC, unbelievably, people still asking me, what can you do with poetry? That question used to make me angry. It used to get me hot. Now I tell them have a seat and ask them how much time they got. For you see, with poetry, I can duly dance down those same halls of learning where I once had the yearning to be a well-accomplished human with a 4.0. But my GPA was sadly way far below. I never got the knack of the educational flow. They made me sit still, so I stood still. I can confidently, comfortably cruise into classrooms where I was once coerced to create a captured, cornered mental state so I could clearly create a way to hate my own mind by my educators. They were eduhators. They formed a form to form my formative years, tainted with intolerance and a tidal wave of tears that sailed all of my dreams away from me. For they likened my self-image with one of stupidity. It was all that I heard and all that I could see. I can now be free. Where I was once imprisoned by a mental prism, my errant splayed thoughts were like hot-colored rocks, endless ammunition for the slings of possibility, but impossibly, all of my targets eluded me. For I was living in the kingdom of couldn't be me. I couldn't see the lock, so I didn't need the key. And when they finally let me go, they said, you don't know poetry. I can versify being victimized into a valiant victory. Verify that when you vilify, you eventually gotta deal with me. The transformation was tremendous. I took the word stupid and I made it stupendous. I began to manhandle the land of language, that language in apathetic and anonymous anguish. I did decide to dissect and divide indefinitely, indubitably, what diction was doing to me. Stab a psyche with a simile, sometimes slip left of center, see, so as to step up into a soliloquy, hail the English alphabet with an oral atrocity. I can wear the face of mental agility, dispel the myth of dental fragility, and proudly embrace my so-called disability. ADD, ADHD, OCD, PTSD. Now I've made an acronymphomaniac out of me, and never once before have I so ever loved M.E. I can turn my inventive imagination into a physical infatuation, not like sugar, not the hard refined, not like sweetener, not the artificial kind. I don't need heroin because I'm a hero in my own mind. Spent some time with my mentality, and what I did find is I can learn. And poetry taught me when the truth is unfurled, I'm the only one man who can change my world, so I can do anything. What can I do with poetry? I ask you. Why don't you tell me?
Experiencing Wakefield's performance has changed me. I cannot tell you exactly how. Maybe someday I'll write a poem about it. I experienced discomfort, agreement, compassion, and understanding. At the end of the performance, for the first time in my life, I jumped up, yelled yes, and clapped so hard that I hurt myself. That has never happened to me anywhere for any performance, let alone church. In the aftermath, I find myself living with these questions. Am I uncomfortable in any given situation because something is wrong, or because I erroneously believe something else is right because of my cultural conditioning? Does my conditioning make me rigid? Am I willing to stay in discomfort till the light bulb comes on? One of the ways we change the world is to listen deeply and respond compassionately. How do I do that? Can I be a bridge for those who may be less aware of their cultural conditioning? How can I be an active part of widening the circle? How do I, as a member of the Committee on Shared Ministry at Calgary Unitarians, guide my congregation into making right relations our modus operandi? I don't have the answers, but I'm old enough to know that I can live into the questions even if I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe the performance has awakened questions in you. Maybe another poet has called your name. Do you have a poem or a poet that has changed your life? Maybe even saved it? Maybe you've written a poem yourself. When we break for coffee, I invite you to share your experiences with each other, or your thoughts about Wakefield's performance or poetry in general. We extinguish our chalice this morning, vowing to carry its light out into the world with us.